Well, there's been big stuff going on in the Shelburne household. I have a new picture of my newest granddaughter for you today. And I have a lot more if you would like to see them, but I will not force you to do that. They're doing great, and actually I got home last night after our church services on Saturday night, and my house was empty. They'd been with us because of sicknesses and illnesses, and I woke up this morning shaking. I need to hold a baby. I'm going to have to join a Granddad's Anonymous group or something like that. But anyway, thank you guys for your prayers and your consideration. We're just so blessed and so thrilled that she is now home. The whole family unit is together again, and they're beginning to try to figure out what normal looks like after this major interruption. We are continuing our series, 2020 Vision, a new perspective for a new decade, trying to learn to look at maybe some old things in new ways. And really, as I think about this, I think that's maybe going to be a continued theme this year in different ways as we try to find different ways of looking at things that maybe we've looked at before. Let me give you a quick review, since this is part 2 of the message we started last week, in case you slept since then, or maybe you weren't here. All of it is available on the website, podcast. You can catch up on that first lesson if you missed it. We talked about the fact that in following Christ, we are always called to make decisions. We are always called to choose the pathway, and we're given many options, but really there are 2 pathways. Jesus would say one is to go the world's way, the pathway that ultimately leads to death, or we go His way, the pathway that ultimately leads to life. And that is true even down into the kind of habits that we have, the way that we spend our effort and our energy and our days. We talked about how often a new year we'll make resolutions. We'll decide that we need to be exercising a little bit more, get a little bit healthier. There's nothing wrong with that. But the trouble with trying harder is kind of like this guy, which is kind of like me. The spirit is willing, but what? The flesh is weak. You know how that verse goes, right? We want to. We're willing to try and try and try, but our human motivation and flesh just doesn't often follow through. I gave you a verse to kind of make you feel better about that. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. We talked about this last week, where Paul says, take the time and trouble to keep yourself spiritually fit. Bodily fitness has certain value, but spiritual fitness is essential, both for this present life and the life that is yet to come. And we jumped off of that and began talking about 4 spiritual habits of highly effective disciples. And that in fact, as we are maybe learning new habits or gaining a new perspective on old ones, we are talking about spending habits, because these are the days that God has given us, the time that God has given us, the money, the resources, the energy, the focus. We're spending these things every single day, and they're connected to the habits that we have. Through each of these habits, I'm giving you 3 R's, a reason and a routine and a result, because it's good to know that. Sometimes it helps us to understand why, and that's where we started last week. I told you 2 of the effective habits of highly effective disciples. The first one was this: spend time with God every day. It's kind of the well, duh, right? Of course, we need to do that. But a lot of the times as believers, we don't. Right? We get caught up in the current and the flow of busy lives, and we just don't take the time to make God number one. The second habit we talked about was spending a tithe on God every week. And that is not because I needed to teach about tithing, because you guys are an incredibly generous church, but because when we get the money part in our lives right, we get the spiritual priorities and financial priorities in harmony, God has got your heart, and He's really going to be able to work in your life. So those are the 2 things we started with. So now, without any further ado, which Jim likes to ado a lot further, let's go into number 3 of these spiritual habits of highly effective disciples. And I realized when I put this up here that I made a mistake in my slide, but here's what it's supposed to say: spend time with other believers regularly and intentionally. Okay, regularly and intentionally. And maybe I threw the word intentional in there twice, because it is so important that we be intentional about these habits, and this one in particular. If we don't intentionally work toward doing these things in our lives, it is not going to happen, and everything else is going to crowd in and take the focus away from the Lord. So intentionality in regards to spending time with other believers. The Bible doesn't say how often we're supposed to do that. It just says and shows us do it often as we can. This is called fellowship, right? You've heard of that before. We talk about 5 purposes of the church, and if you think about it, we looked last week at these first 2. Those are really worship. They key into the worship purpose. We exist to worship the Lord, and those were very vertical in our time with God and our tithe given to God. Those are acts of worship. So that's one of the purposes. But this third one keys into another one, the fellowship purpose. Let me give you a very detailed, in-depth definition of fellowship. You ready? Hang on. 2 fellows on the same ship. You get more here at Washington Avenue, okay? They had to get to know each other because it was a long trip. Fellowship is one of our bedrock purposes, and it's a very common factor in healthy churches, but also in happy, healthy believers. And I'm going to tell you in this segment that you need 2 levels of fellowship. You need fellowship regularly and intentionally with a larger group and with a smaller group of believers, okay? The reason for spending time with other believers is very simple. It's a matter of encouragement. You know, you can't really see it. Most of us, we kind of put on our nice clothes and we kind of put on our nice faces and we come into the church where the standard answer to any question is, fine, I'm fine. A lot of times we're really not. If you could just see the truth, some of us come crawling in here. Some of us have burdens that are unbelievable. And a lot of times we come in beaten down by the world. You come in tired out, worn out, stressed out, overloaded, empty. The church is supposed to be a spiritual filling station. And I hope that every time you come here, you leave recharged and you leave pumped up. You leave better than you were when you came. At the end of the service, we're going to go out here, and guess what? It's not going to be very long before we get thrown right back in the ring for another round with life. We need this time. Sometimes it's hard to get to church, isn't it? You ever notice on Sunday morning the devil will mess with you? If you have a family at home, the devil is going to just mess up those kids, and they're going to mess you up, and it's going to be the hardest time of your week because he doesn't want you here. And he certainly doesn't want your kids in children's church and in the nursery or with other kids. Anytime that you're focused on getting with other believers, he's going to try to hinder that. Sometimes it's really hard to just drum up what it takes to get here. I remember a story about a guy who was kind of dragging his feet about going to church. He was just lying in the bed, and the alarm kept going off, and the snooze kept going off, and finally his wife comes and says, "You better get up. It's time for church." And the guy says, "I'm not going to church. Nobody really likes me there, and nobody cares. If I even show up, they won't know the difference." Well, some of you wives may have had to do this. The wife came back and said, "Now, honey, I know how you feel, but you got to go to church. You got to get up. Come on, let's go." And he says, "Give me 2 good reasons." She says, "Well, number 1, the Bible tells us we're supposed to go to church, be with other believers. Second reason is you're the pastor." Sometimes it's hard, isn't it? And even though I'm kind of expected to be here, sometimes it's hard because our heart's not in it. I grew up in the churches of Christ, loved that heritage, loved those people, but we had a verse, Hebrews 10:25. We use this verse often to guilt people into coming to church. And I remember the King James Version expression of that verse. It said, "Let us not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as some are in the habit of doing." And we would use that verse with a point, right? And what always kind of struck me as funny is we're telling the people who are there, right? Not to forsake, they're there, we're preaching to the wrong audience, perhaps. It says in a little different version, I like this one because it goes with my message, "Let us not give up the habit of meeting together, as some are inclined to do. Instead, let us encourage one another." See, that's the point of the people part of the church. We exist here to encourage one another, and that happens when we come together. We get a lift, and there's a quality in a church that's healthy where those that come in feel it. They sense the life that's there, and it just is encouraging to be with other people of like mind, other people who are struggling in the very same ways that you are, other people who have made the effort to get here because their focus is on the same thing. They're looking toward the Lord. We need to come together. Notice he says very specifically, don't give up on the habit. Don't give up on the habit. My oldest granddaughter, Margot, calls her blanket a habit, which is kind of funny, right? Because blankets tend to be habits. But she can't say blanket quite right, so she calls it her habit. And I thought about that. It is kind of a good word for it, because the habit of coming together for us should be like a blanket. It should be warm when we come together. It should be comforting to come together and just to surround ourselves with that warmth and that goodness of other believers. You know, the fact is, though, that you're never going to be an effective Christian if you try to do it alone, because it's just too hard. It's too hard to do this on your own. We're designed to be like coals in a fire. And you know how fire works. There's no flame coming off of this. This is about as hot of a fire as you can get. And those coals will glow a very, very long time. It would even take an awful lot of water to put that fire out at that point. But if you take a pair of tongs and you pull one of those glowing coals and you lay it over all by itself, guess what? In a very short time, it's going to cool off. And a little longer, it's going to become dull. And a little bit longer, it's going to be black. And before you know it, it's going to be cold. You can take that same coal, put it right back in that bed of coals, and it's going to reignite. That's the design that the church is supposed to have in our lives. Without the heat of fellowship, we burn out and we grow cold. Here at Washington Avenue, we have a total membership of something like 1,000 people. You know, I wish everyone would come to church, but if they did all at the same time, we'd be in deep, deep trouble. Most recent counts, we have something like 750, 800 active members. That's people who show up even occasionally that we know about and we know them. And there's sadly a couple of hundred on the roll that we don't know much about. But our average attendance on a weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is something close to 600. And you know what that means? That's a lot of people, and I'm excited about that. And we're going to have a new parking lot soon. We can put more people out there. But what it really means to me is this: about half of us miss worship every week. About half of us are not here. And I'm preaching to the wrong crowd, right? Because you're here. Okay, never mind. We have gotten to the point in our culture where we approach going to worship, coming to this very important assembly, very casually. We just don't take it as seriously anymore. But every time you miss an opportunity of getting together with God's people, you're not only robbing the other people, you're hurting yourself. And we begin to dry up spiritually, and we grow a little bit colder because we don't have the blanket, the habit of fellowship. And if we're not careful, the God fire that's in us can completely go out. Okay, that's the reason for fellowship. We need to make this habit a priority. You know, I was telling the first service, because they skew just a little bit older than this one. They're the more experienced members of our church. I don't have to worry too much about them, because if they are standing and breathing, they will be at church. That's what that generation did. And I love that about them. But that generation of habitual church attenders is kind of, I told them this, and they kind of looked at dying off, is what I said. I should think about my words more carefully, probably. But they're always here. But in our culture at large, we've gotten to the point where we are so busy, and we have a million things to do, and we have a million good things to do. And the church, to so many folks, has become just one more good thing. But it's not a priority thing. And we'll let kids' sports get in the way of that all the time. We'll let our own sports get in the way of that. We'll let our trips and our hobbies, and maybe I've got the sniffles this morning, or, you know, whatever. We're just getting away from that sense of priority. So let's rekindle that in our lives. That's the reason we need that. God designed a routine for us coming together as well, the second of the R's. In Acts 5, verse 42, he talks about the early church, says they met day after day in the temple courts and from house to house. We need regular contact with other believers. And it says day after day. That means they didn't just meet once a week on Saturday or Sunday like we do here for worship. In the Greek, that means literally they met as often as they could. And I tell you, with the stresses and the challenges and demands of life in the 21st century, coming to church maybe once a week or maybe twice a month for part of an hour to kind of get together with other Christians and have a little pep rally, even though the sermon may be great it's just not going to cut it, right? It's just not enough. Because life today takes more out of us than ever. These days we need more support, more encouragement. We need more inspiration. We need more reminders of who God is and what He's done. We need more strength and more direction and more growth, and a little tiny dose of that occasionally at a worship service. It's kind of like deciding you're going to go drive to Florida, but you're going to start out by putting $4 worth of gasoline in your gas tank. It's just not going to get you very far. The book of Acts says they met day after day in the temple courts, also from house to house. Temple courts in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple would hold about 50,000 people. And we don't know if 50,000 of them came together, but it says in the book of Acts, church was growing by thousands and thousands of people every day at that time. And so there may have been many, many thousands, perhaps that many there. That is a mega church by any definition. And that's why they got the attention of the culture around them. There was something big happening. There was something going on, and the culture took notice. It's just great to come together with other believers and to come together with a good number of other believers. I'd a lot rather sing with 250 people than to sing with 20 people, because I sound better singing with 250 people. And a lot of you do too, right? Right, Dane? Right? There is a synergy, though, here between us, and we need a larger group fellowship, just like we're doing right now. But that's not enough. Let me needle you a little bit here, okay? Some of you don't need to be needled, but some of you maybe do, because it's so easy for us to fail to spend that intentional time in a smaller group. We need to be in a Bible school class, something like that, where there are not 250 people. There's 12 or 25 or 30 or 40 or 50, because in that group we can know and be known. It's really easy to come in here, to come to a large worship event, and you just kind of slip in quietly and you slip out quietly, and it's possible that no one will even know that you're here. And that may serve you very well if you're introverted and you don't really feel like you need people, but the day will come when the wheels fall off of your life and you will need someone to know, and you're going to want someone to know. Or maybe you're going to be that for someone else, and if you're not there, you won't know. There's so many reasons that we need to be diligent and focused on this. Fellowship is the core of this, but you know what? If you're having fellowship with a smaller group of people, maybe you're in a Bible study class or a small group, a men's group, a women's group, whatever, you're also getting discipleship, because you're learning how to walk like Jesus walked in the footsteps of the Master. And so there's another one of those purposes that comes to bear in these habits. We have so many opportunities for smaller group fellowship here at Washington Avenue. If you just come to one big worship event a week or twice a month, you're not getting it. When you leave today, out in the main lobby, there are tables set up with all kinds of descriptions of classes that are coming up. These are all smaller group opportunities, Sunday night classes or classes that happen during the week, during the day. I'm here all the time, and it's very rare that this church doesn't have something going on during the day and in the evening. Lots of opportunities to get in that smaller group flow. So don't say that there's not. There really are. Why do we do this? Well, the result of getting together, in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, it just says this very simply: two are better off than one, because together they are more effective. If one falls down, the other can help him up. That's why God made the church out of people. And we need to get more involved in each other's life. We need to do life together, because that is the picture of a healthy church. Thankfully, hundreds and hundreds of people here do that, but if you're not one of them, let me encourage you to get off the bench and get in the game, right? That kind of keys us into the next step, the fourth and the last one that we're talking about today. And this one just, they aren't really in any specific order, but they're so very important, every one of them. Here's number 4. Spend unselfish effort in service often. Okay, we talked about time with God every day. We talked about last week a tithe for God every week. We've talked about intentional time with other believers. Here's the last one: spend unselfish effort in service often. Okay, here's the reason. We'll jump right in. Colossians 1, verse 16. It's a simple little short verse, depending on the translation that you read. But I like simple short verses because that's all my brain can remember anymore, right? Colossians 1:6 says, you were created by God for God. Everybody remember that one, right? Say that one with me. You were created by God, for God. Now, I'm going to mess with your party here a little bit, but I want to tell you what that means. It's not about you, friends. Life is not about you. That sounds like a future sermon series, perhaps. In our world, we are taught by our culture at every possible juncture that it is all about me. Even in the way we do church today in America, we're consumeristic, and our churches tend to line up and try to do things to get the most people to come and be a part of that. We've almost made church about us. It's not meant to be. In the kingdom of Jesus Christ, service is the highest calling. It is the higher honor. And Jesus said those who would be great must first be willing to be the servant of all. You remember when he talked about that? He was with his disciples, and they've been traveling, and back then they rode, they didn't ride in cars like we do. They walked most of the places they went, and they walked on dusty roads, and it was warm. And can you imagine how grody and awful their feet got? Can you imagine how their feet would be needing a bath by the end of that day? And so they come to this place for supper, and usually there's a servant there. This job was reserved for the least of the least. It was the worst job. They couldn't even have Jewish people do this. It was that demeaning. You'd have to have a foreign servant, a Gentile servant to do this. Can you imagine what it was like to be that servant? And all these guys there, Jesus and his 12 disciples, and they show up, and there's no one to wash the feet, and very quickly, without saying anything, Jesus takes off his good clothes, and he puts on an apron, and he bends down and begins to wash their stinking, dirty, nasty, grody, gravelly, toe fungusy feet. Need I go on? And after he finished, he said, you know what I've done? I've done this to give you an example. As I've done for you, you should do for each other. The one who would be greatest among you must be willing to be the servant of all. Mark 10, verse 45 says, Jesus Christ came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Another time, Jesus was talking to his guys, and he was making another example. He's looking at the power structures in the Gentile world, and he probably could just as easily have looked at the ones in the Jewish world because they existed too. But he said, see how the Gentile rulers lord it over the other people? Got the ones on top, make all the rules. The ones on top are always managing those below, driving those below. He said, you see that? You notice that? You see how they do that? And then he gave them 4 little words that were to be their credo. Not so with you. It's not the way you're going to do it in my kingdom. Jesus was a servant. He commands us to serve. That's our reason to serve. We said last week that giving is an antidote for materialism. Well, serving is the cure for the idolatry of selfishness, which is the number one idol. It is epidemic in our culture. It's epidemic in every culture. Because by nature, I look out for me. But we got to remember, just as we said, our money is not ours. Our time is not ours either. Let me encourage you to find a way to serve in the Lord's church. You need a routine to do that. Find a ministry within the church and get involved. Out here, one of the classes we're going to be doing on Sunday nights, I'm teaching class 301. That's all about that. How do you find that place that God made you for, the sweet spot in which you can serve? We are constantly seeking volunteers. I could spend an hour up here telling you about opportunities. We always need greeters and people in our hospitality ministry. We need communion servers in all of our services. We need teachers who will teach everything from the youngest to the oldest. We need group leaders for the different groups that we're talking about earlier. We need people who know technology, can help us in those areas. We need people who are musically gifted and have that possibility. You know, if you join the music ministry, like the choir or the band or something like that, you have killed 2 birds with 1 stone. You're serving in a ministry, and you're also in a smaller group. See, it's happening. One of the purposes in our church is the purpose of service, and you're accomplishing that ultimate purpose. You can get involved in Frog Squad. That's our after-school ministry at Lamar Elementary School, or Snack Pack that feeds a lot of those same kids. You could get involved in our new prayer ministry that has just taken off with new wings. There's so many different areas. What I'm talking about here is the weekly focused giving of your most valuable assets, your time and your energy. Not even talking about your money, because the most valuable thing you have is your time and your energy. The result, if you'll do this, your life will make eternal significance. Okay, think about that. Everything that you do for the Lord, whether it's large or small, makes eternal significance. There are a number of teachers right now, and boy, we could use more of those. They're in the preschool area doing battle with the forces of shortness, right? And they're wondering, how long is Jim going to preach today, right? But you know what they're doing? That's a hard job, even if you like little ankle biters, right? That's a hard job. But they're teaching them little bitty Bible lessons about Jesus, and what they're doing is making an eternal difference. Those seeds will sprout one day. They have changed eternity by giving of themselves. If we're not doing things like that, if we're not serving beyond our own selfish interest, we're just wrapped up in a bunch of earthly piffle that is all going to die when we do. As we serve, we become more like Jesus than just like ourselves. We value the kingdom and the people in the kingdom and the church more, and we find satisfaction and fulfillment. You know what's wrong with most people who get grumpy and bent out of shape in churches? You know what's wrong? They need a job. Maybe a nap too, but they need a job, right? They need to become outwardly focused instead of just inwardly focused on themselves, because that's the pathway to satisfaction and fulfillment. And stuff gets done. It has to be done. And as we serve, you know, something else neat that happened. We've talked about all four of the other purposes. There's a fifth purpose, evangelism. A lot of our service is pointed that way. People get reached and loved and taught and helped and served and saved, and God smiles on that whole process. We're going to be featuring in the coming months just opportunities for you to get more involved in serving this community, simple little things that we can do. And I hope that you'll be excited about those like I am. What's the result? Eternal significance, right? And that should get all of our attention. I want to give you a verse here that goes with this. I have trouble. I can remember verses, and I remember a lot of different versions because I've read so many different versions of the Bible that they're all kind of muddled up in there. I can't remember addresses of verses sometimes. But this is one I've always remembered from an early age, and maybe it's because I liked what it said. 1 Corinthians 15:58, therefore, my brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know, listen to this, that your labor in the Lord is never in vain. That's such an important verse. The things that we attach our lives to that are God-sized, that are bigger than we are, those are things that are never going to come without benefit and without fruit. Let me read that to you in another version, the Message, because it's so important. He says, with all of this going for us, my dear, dear friends, stand your ground. It's the same verse. And don't hold back. Throw yourselves into the work of the Master, confident that nothing you do for Him is a waste of time or effort. Nothing you do for Him is a waste of time. Do you ever feel like you spend your day wasting your time? I mean, I know I'll come to work sometimes, think I've got this agenda of all these things I've got to get done, and I know that when I get home, my wife's going to ask me, what did you do today? Oh, my goodness, I hate it when she asks me that, right? You guys, you feeling it, guys? Because for men, we just survived it. We don't want to relive it all again. And women want to go through all of it, right? Unpack it. So give your guys a break, ladies. Don't ask them that. But I will come home sometimes and I'll think, I didn't get one thing done that I meant to do today. And maybe some of it was just as important. God had another agenda. I grant that. But sometimes it feels like you spin your wheels and you're wasting your time. Paul says, and these are his last words to the Corinthian church. And the context of this is resurrection. He's been telling them about Jesus' resurrection, the power over death, and that we have the same power. And so in light of that, he says, therefore, you got to know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever going to be a waste of time, because it's attached to the gospel and it's attached to resurrection power. And it's going to allow you to see victory over impossibilities, and it's going to be a real game changer as you get involved in serving Him. I asked you this question a couple of weekends ago, and I'm going to keep asking you because I think it's a really great question. We know that the world is going to be the world. It's messed up, it's broken and destroyed. The real question for us is, will the church be the church? Will the church be the church? Will we quit playing church? And will we finally, once and for all, get serious about being a part of the Lord's kingdom? This is all about spending time, our habits, spending our lives on things that will change the world and change us. Or are we spending our lives just killing time? Well, these are 4 pretty basic and simple habits. I mean, this is not rocket science. But I don't think they're optional if we're serious about being spiritually fit. There are many other good things I could have talked with you about, but these 4 represent the 4 most important high-value areas in our lives: our time, our money, our relationships, and our effort. If God is first place in these areas, then, man, that means you mean business. And you want to see what He can do in your life. You're serious about this stuff. You really want to be spiritually fit. You want to get stronger every day. And you want to see the blessings that come from these kinds of habits, and you will. But I say this to me just as much as I say it to you. If these 4 areas don't belong to God in your life, maybe you need to be wondering just how much of you He really has. At the end of the book of Nehemiah, the whole nation of Israel does something impressive. They make a growth covenant to God. I mean, they've done something massive. They've been building walls and putting things back together. Incredible, incredible undertaking. They want to do what's right in their next step. They want to supposedly, so to speak, be the church. They don't just want to be wall builders. They want to be God's people. And so even though they have that desire, they realize that most of them are growing cold and they're weak in their habits and they're inconsistent and they haven't been doing things they were supposed to be doing. They've forgotten things that God had told them to do. So they come together and they make a covenant. Covenants are a lot bigger deal to Israelites than they are to Americans. But they make a covenant, which is a binding agreement with God. And the covenant is that they will pray for each other, they will encourage each other, they will help each other to do the things that they're supposed to be doing in the first place anyway. And they actually sign an actual growth covenant. I'm not going to make you do that today. But after they signed that covenant, their leaders put a seal on it, they put their stamp on it, and then they all began to pray for and encourage and help each other do the right thing to be the church of that time. Nehemiah 9:39 says, we are making a binding covenant, putting it in writing. Our spiritual leaders are affixing their seals to it. It's just so time that we as the church in America got a little bit more serious about being the church in America. And it's time that we focus on building something that will last beyond ourselves. And these are 4 areas where if you'll begin training in these areas, you don't have to master them in a week or a month or a year. It may take the rest of your life. If you'll begin training in these 4 areas, God will get your heart. He will get a hold of you. So let's bow and let's make a covenant. Let this be very personal between you and God. Don't let me make one for you, all right? This is not Jim's promise to God on your behalf. But as we think about this, as we ask ourselves the question, Lord, will the church be the church? Help us to know that it really does come down to little things, just as basic as our habits. And if the church continues, it will be because the followers of Christ have the right habits and the right priorities. And if the church does not thrive in the future, it will come to an end because we have simply become like the culture. So, Father, today, as we finish this message time and get ready to sing together and cement it, Lord, we want you to build our lives. And Lord, we covenant with you that we will take more seriously the need to spend time with you every day, not just going to church once in a while, but that we will take the time to really focus on you and listen to you. Just be instead of always doing. Father, I pray that you will allow us to covenant in such a way that we would be able to give our spiritual priorities to you, and that we would reorder them if necessary, and we would cut other things out of our lives that keep us from making you a priority, because it's all yours. Father, I pray that you will hear our agreement that we need to spend more time with other believers, and we do that regularly and systematically so that we can be a burning fire for you instead of a bunch of lukewarm has-beens. And Father, we covenant before you today to spend more time not killing time, more time serving different kinds of ways that have eternal significance, that bless others in ways that would even bless us. Father, we need your help to do this, because it is not a matter of just trying harder. We've done that and we've failed. It is a matter of training with you, training in spiritual disciplines, empowered by your Spirit, held accountable by others, encouraged by the growth that we experience and the strength that we see. Lord, let us be the church. Let us not worry too much about what the world is doing and what the world is saying. Let us be the church. And let that begin with each and every one of us. We beg you, Father, to give us the strength to do this. We humbly lay these requests before you at your feet. Through Christ we pray. Amen.